I used to believe stone was indifferent, that corridors didn't make decisions, and that light, if you fed it oil and patience, would always outrun the dark. I believed that until I heard the first creak come from inside the wall, a dry, old bone sound that didn't belong to wind or sand or any map I trusted. It wasn't a gust. It wasn't settling. It was pressure. My lamp leaned as if exhaled on by something breathing from inside the passage. The flames stretched. The air thickened. Not hot, not cold. Heavy. The kind of heavy that sits on your chest and charges interest on every breath. Mahmoud looked at me and didn't have to say a word. Clara raised the Bolex, but her hands were shaking. The focus seemed to breathe with us. 2 more meters, I whispered, trying to make arithmetic pass for courage. 2 meters. Rope tight at my waist, chalk arrows on stone, watch ticking steady, all under control, until the ceiling lowered a finger and the floor rose another. Not much, until it's everything. If you've ever been jammed in an elevator, or held your breath during a scan in a machine that sounds like it's eating, you know. The body panics before the mind. First, the mouth goes dry, then the ear begins to ring, and finally comes the cold certainty. There isn't enough space here for me. Before I drag you into the passage with me, tell me which country you're watching from in the comments. I mean it. Brazil, Portugal, United States, Japan. I read them all. And if you like horror that feels like a confession, subscribe and turn on notifications. From here on, the pyramid isn't a backdrop. It's a character, and it's awake. Breathe in, hold, let it out slowly. Ready? Then come. Dawn over the Giza Plateau is a contradiction. The desert looks frozen, the air mean with a thin cold that knows bone. By mid-morning it will be a kiln, we told ourselves. But at first light you shiver at the foot of a mountain that men made. And you understand why the old songs are part work chant, part prayer. We were a small team because small teams have fewer ways to panic. Mahmoud, our foreman, knew which cracks were jokes and which were threats. Clara carried the Bolex like it was an oath. She's the kind of person who gets steadier when a thing starts to go wrong. And me, I had numbers and a stubborn belief that you can make the past sit still long enough to measure it. Our job was simple enough on the page. Look for evidence that would finally settle the argument. Internal ramps. Theories are cheap until you put a clinometer against a stone and find angles that shouldn't be there. If a hidden spiral threaded the pyramid, it would leave signatures, odd junctions, joints that breathe, traces of friction where sledges had kissed limestone, and the kind of hairline tolerances that only make sense if you built a road inside the mountain while you stacked it. The inspector gave us a key ring and the look of a man who trusts electricity more than legend. Stay in surveyed corridors. No side shafts without a line on you. Air pockets, settling tones. Ignore the stories. He smiled, and the smile said he'd never heard a passage tell him to stop. Mahmoud didn't smile. He pressed his palm to the casing stone, the way you touch the forehead of a child with a fever. Stone remembers men, he said. Men forget stone. We entered through cold. Pyramids keep their own season. The light from our lamps licked along polished walls and ran ahead into angles where sight turns into guess. We passed the grand gallery like trespassers inside an instrument. Ribs, resonance, geometry that feels like a throat. We'd rehearsed the plan. Lay a rope lifeline from the main corridor into the narrow passage we'd identified on survey notes. Chalk arrows at each corner, then creep along with measurements. Slope, clearance, stone seams, and see if this forgotten branch carried the math of a ramp. Ramps are about repeatability. Once you see the pattern, the whole pyramid tells it to you. If the pattern hid here, it would whisper it in angles and wear. Rope tight, no heroics, Mahmoud said, looping the hemp around a carved stop and tugging twice. He took the tail end around his waist and handed me the midline. You lead, I anchor. Clara in the middle. Clara grinned at me with that pale morning face that manages to look awake and haunted at once. If it tries to eat us, she said, I'll film its teeth. Don't joke, Mahmoud said, and the rope thudded against his palm as if agreeing. The side passage wasn't dramatic. That's how fear prefers to begin, with a mouth that doesn't look like a mouth. A seam got a little generous. A joint opened like a book you could slip a fingertip into, and then a block didn't quite fit as neatly as the ones near it. "Joint's dry," I said. There was no mortar smear here. The ancient masons had left it clean. "Could be access. Or repair," Mahmoud said. He shrugged with his eyes. But it smelled old. Smell is a more honest instrument than most of ours. When we pried a little, gently with wedges and prayer, the stone sighed against stone, and a sliver of darkness admitted our lamp cones. Cool air moved. Not much, just enough to lift sweat from the upper lip. Clara's lamp picked out a surface behind. Smoother than the block we'd disturbed, wrong in a way your hand knows before your head. "Not casing," she murmured, but finished. She lowered herself in and I followed, the rope taking our weight for that first committed slide. Inside, the light did what light does with dust, found each mote and gave it a stage. The passage ran straight for 6 paces, not tall enough to stand, barely wide enough to crawl with your shoulders committed to the walls. To our right, the stone carried faint striations, a memory of being planed. To our left, someone had made the rock obedient and indifferent and smooth. I set the clinometer. "Incline 2 degrees down," I said. "Too gentle to be drainage. Good for hauling." Clara rolled film. The Bolex ticked with a comfortable honesty. "Say it like we'll be dead when they watch it," she said. It wasn't morbid the way she said it. It was protocol. "Secondary access channel," I narrated. "Possibly a segment of an internal ramp. Angle suggests load management rather than ceremonial use. No decoration, no tool police marks we can see yet." "Breathe," Mahmoud said behind us. He wasn't telling us to relax. He was listening to our breaths. We made the first corner, chalk arrow, rope taut. The world became a math of knees, elbows, and the half-moon of lamplight. When you crawl stone, your body invents new senses, where your rib grazes, where your belt buckle tattles, where your hand knows a change in finish that your eyes can't name. At the second bend, the passage surprised us by widening a fraction. Not much, just enough to make you greedy for height. My lamp caught the ceiling block where it keyed into the wall, and I reached up to feel a hairline seam, and the stone moved. A shiver, more than a shift. A fraction of a finger. But stone that has decided to be part of a pyramid does not shiver. I pulled my hand back with the instinct of a child touching a hot stove. For a breath. 2. 3. Nothing. Then a sound. Old wood bending, but from inside rock. Something realigning where no living carpenter worked. Clara heard it. "Tell me that's settling," she said. "Lie to me if you have to." "Rope," Mahmoud said, as if the word itself could brace the world. "We keep going," I said, because saying it was the same as believing it. We don't assume what we feel. We measure. We measured. The incline kept its lazy 2 degrees. The width, from shoulder to shoulder, flirted with comfort and then denied it. The finish stayed strangely gentle on one side and unbothered on the other. My pencil began to sweat with me. At the 4th bend, the air pressure changed. You feel it in your ears before you feel it in your chest. My lamp flame leaned, not windward, inward. The passage was taking a little of what we had and making it its own. "Back," Mahmoud said. "We test if it's breathing or if we are." "Another meter," I said. "We mark, and then back." He allowed it. I heard the rope's judgment in his silence. We crawled that meter with the caution that refuses to make speed into a virtue. Clara kept the camera up, as if truth could be filmed into safety. At the 5th bend, the floor rose a thumb, and the ceiling dropped a thumb, and the passage gave us a new fact. It could tighten. It wasn't theatrical. There was no roar, Just that same slow creak like a person who's been lying in bed too long shifting a hip. The chalk arrow we'd sketched on the last corner thinned as if pinched. My spine remembered how to be smaller without asking me. "Back," I said immediately. "Back now." We reversed with the graceless haste of people who have remembered they are made of meat. Rope slid, chalk glowed, lamps carved the same yards they'd just blessed. At the second bend, the stone exhaled. You could hear it if you wanted to be afraid. You could refuse to hear it if you wanted to be foolish. We were exactly afraid enough. At the mouth of the passage, Mahmoud's face held the kind of pale that doesn't come from light. "It's not a collapse," he said. "Collapses don't take their time." "What do they do then?" Clara asked. "They finish," he said simply. "This is deciding." We rested in the main corridor, where height returned, and the pyramid felt like architecture again instead of idea. I checked the notebook. The numbers were honest. The drawing was clean. The little arrows pointed back into a place that didn't want to keep the same dimensions twice. "Again," I said finally. "We go again, but with sense." Mahmoud didn't argue. Sense to him meant more rope. He tied a second line to the first so that he could act as an anchor around the heaviest block near the mouth. I tied a bowline around my waist and another around Clara. He made us say the knot names out loud like catechism. Then we set 3 rules. Never pass a corner without marking 2 arrows. If the flame leaned inward more than a finger's width, retreat. If the rope snagged for any reason, do not pull. Reverse to free it. "Third rule saves fingers," Mahmoud said, "and lives." We went again. The first 2 corners behaved like what we were willing to call stone. At the third, the seam above my head felt warm where before it had been indifferent. I told myself heat moves into hands fast when your blood thinks it's in trouble. At the fourth, Clara stopped me with a palm to my boot. "Listen," she whispered. It was a command, not a suggestion. The sound came from ahead and slightly left, a slow, low draw. The flame leaned, obedient to the passage's private weather. I could feel my lungs competing, each breath a negotiation. The rope, under my palm, vibrated with Mahmoud's patience. 2 breaths, I said. Then we mark, and we go. The passage answered the way a patient person answers a child he plans to outlast. It sighed again and tempted us with an inch more room. We took the inch and wrote the arrow and began to reverse. That's when the floor moved, not like a trap, like a chest rising. It lifted enough to make my knees whisper a prayer my mouth didn't know. The ceiling didn't descend. The floor came up to meet it, as if the pyramid had decided the space between was extravagant. We made the corner. The chalk arrow we'd just drawn now looked like someone had pressed a thumb into soft clay. "It's pinching our marks," Clara said. Her voice held professional wonder and personal offense. "We're leaving," Mahmoud said. There was no debate left in his tone. Rope slid, knees scraped. At the mouth, air had never tasted like that. Simple, undeserved, rich. We spilled into the main corridor and lay there like we'd reached shore. The lamp flames straightened. The ringing retreated from my ears. The notebook under my chest felt like a sin. Clara sat up first. "We got it on film," she said. She wasn't boasting. She was bargaining with her own fear. "We have the arrows, the seams, the lean. We can show the incline." Mahmoud looked down the corridor toward the light we'd left outside. "If we go again," he said, "we leave a line that takes us out even if we can't talk." I nodded. "And we go with less on us. Strip weight, we become measurements, not people." Clara wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and smudged fear and dust across her skin. "We go with a second lamp," she said. "So when one leans, we can tell if it's the passage or us." We ate dates with shaky hands and sipped water we didn't deserve. The pyramid did not make a sound. I wrote rules in my notebook like a man writing a will. We went a third time. This time, Mahmoud fixed the line not only to stone, but to himself, the way a parent ties a toddler at a street market. "If it chooses you," he said, "it chooses me." He said it like faith, not poetry. Inside, the passage welcomed us by staying the same for longer than we expected. We marked the first 3 corners. Our lamps agreed on the air's behavior. The rope hummed domestic. I believed for 5 whole breaths that fear had mistaken itself for evidence. At the 5th corner, the chalk from our last attempt had slumped into a faint oval. The air tasted like a coin held in the mouth. I leaned my lamp toward the seam above and watched the flame reach, and then lean back, as if the passage had sucked what it wanted and was now exhaling in our faces. "Now," I said, and we began to reverse, carefully, carefully. The rope snagged. Not trapped, not locked. Snagged, the kind of catch that makes a fool tug. Mahmoud's 3rd rule bore teeth in my ear. "Do not pull. Reverse to free it." "Stop," I whispered. "We go back 3 hands. Slow." We crept a distance measured in heartbeats. The snag didn't ease. I could feel the rope's complaint against my palm, the vibration of fiber on stone. I inched my hips left and my lamp right and saw what had taken it. The floor block had lifted in its bed just enough to offer a lip. It had lifted since we'd gone by minutes earlier. Clara breathed. "It's learning." I don't know if that's true. I know it felt true. I know that feeling can be enough to kill a person in a place where space is a currency and you are poor. "On 3, I said. I raise the rope. You slide under. I lower. We pass it forward. We did it. The rope came free with a little sound like a violinist clearing her throat. We moved. The chalk arrow at the next bend had narrowed still more. My chest had become an instrument I no longer understood how to play. At the mouth, I made the mistake of looking back. The passage didn't move, but it looked expectant, as if, given time, it would try again. As if we had taught it the shape of us, and it had liked the lesson. Outside, kind air fouled itself with heat. The inspector took one look at us and decided to be a bureaucrat about it. "Well," he said, "find your ramps?" "We found where they might be," I said, and my voice sounded like I'd borrowed it. "And we found out what they cost." He frowned. "You people always want your discoveries to be dramatic." Clara lifted the Bolex case. "It's dramatic because it's true," she said. "But it's not a curse. It's mechanics, pressure, tolerances, mass that remembers how to sit and how to shift." Mahmoud said nothing. He was listening to the pyramid the way you listen at a door you're not sure you want to open. After a while, he nodded once, the smallest bow to a living thing. "One more time," he said softly. "But we take less breath with us." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said, "we tie the rope differently." He showed us a knot I'd never used. A way of tethering a man that makes pulling him out possible even when he cannot help you. He cut a length of line we hadn't planned to sacrifice and left it coiled in the main corridor like a promise to a future version of ourselves. He placed a chisel at the joint that had sighed, as if giving it a toothpick might keep it busy. We went a 4th time because that's what stubborn people do when a story starts to rhyme with the thing they want to prove. It wasn't brave, it wasn't smart, it was faith in measurement, which is its own kind of superstition. At the 3rd bend, my lamp did something new. It leaned toward the seam, and then fluttered, and then went small in a way that had nothing to do with oil. "Something's drinking the light," Clara said, her voice scientific and scared. At the 4th, we heard a voice. Not words, not language. The shape of a person exhaling in a space too small for comfort. It didn't come from ahead or behind. It came from around, as if the passage were the throat of a thing practicing how to speak. I said my own name aloud, like an idiot. It sounded wrong in there, too thick, too costly. Mahmoud tugged twice on the rope. The signal we'd agreed would mean we go, even if pride begs to stay. We began to reverse. The rope, kind, did not snag. The chalk arrows, unkind, looked thinner than they should. At the mouth, I turned again, because some men only learn by looking twice at what wants to kill them. The passage was the same bland slit we had met an hour before. The difference was in me. I now knew what it could do slowly. And slowness is the worst kind of killing when you're inside a place that has all the time in the world. We left the side passage sealed as best we could with the block that had sighed. It settled a little too willingly, as if chewing a last bite. We logged measurements. We drew. We pretended we had something like proof. Clara's film lay in a small tin like a sleeping animal. When we stepped into the sun, the plateau looked human again. Tourists laughing at guides, hawkers with postcards, a boy trying to sell us warm soda. The normal world was offensive and dear. I breathed air without paying extra for it. For a moment, the pyramid behind me felt like a mountain again. For a moment, I let it. "Tonight?" Clara asked. "Before dusk," Mahmoud said. "We go before dusk or we don't go." "Why?" I asked. "Because if you don't ask, you're only pretending to be rational." "Because at night," he said, "things that move slowly finish." I slept an hour with my boots still on and woke with the taste of coin in my mouth. We checked the knots the way superstitious men touch rosaries. We ate in silence. We didn't pray, because none of us had a God we wanted to offend by asking for the wrong thing. We went back at 4 in the afternoon, when the sun turns honest light into something that looks like memory. The inspector had gone home. The guards asked for a cigarette and wished us luck without meaning it. The pyramid waited. It has been good at waiting for a very long time. We tied the rope different. We carried less. We took, besides lamps and line, only what a person needs when what he needs is to come back with a sentence that proves he was there. At the mouth of the passage, I laid my palm on stone and made the mistake of thinking about lungs again. "Don't think of breath," Mahmoud said gently behind me. "It charges more when you do." I believed him. I believe him still. And we went in. We went back at 4, because Mahmoud said dusk makes slow things finish. And I believed him. The plateau had softened to bronze. The tour buses were leaving, and with them the kind of noise that makes you feel safely ordinary. We moved like people who had rehearsed their fear. Less gear, tighter knots. A plan that assumed we would forget how to speak if it came to that. Mahmoud tied the new tether around my waist with a bowline on a bight, then ran the standing part through a pulley he'd rigged from a steel ring and a prayer. He clipped a second line to Clara with a simple bowline, the kind you can yank on a drowning person without breaking them. "If one of you stops being a person for a minute," he said, "the other is still getting out." "You talk like you've done this before," Clara said, forcing a grin. "I've known rooms that wanted to keep a man," he said. "A well in a chute. A grain silo with too much air that had forgotten how to move. Not everything that kills you is fast." We stepped back into the pyramid, where the air has no interest in being your friend. The main corridor greeted us with its familiar, respectful geometry. The side mouth waited, just a seam, the kind your eye slides past unless it has a reason to be cruel. "Rope tight," Mahmoud said. 2 tugs, out. 3 tugs, out even if you hate me. We slid inside. Light made a cone. Dust made itself beautiful for a moment and then turned ugly again. The chalk we'd laid earlier had set like thin milk, edges dulled by a force that wasn't quite gravity. My lamp behaved for 5 breaths, and then leaned inward, obedient to a pressure with a schedule. We marked the first corner. The clinometer read 2 degrees down. The passage was pretending to be predictable, a kindness you should never trust. At the second corner, the ceiling block above my shoulder felt warm again, as if it remembered being a tool once and missed it. At the third, the air tasted like a coin. The metal of it sat on my tongue and made me think of blood, even though there was none. "Stop," Clara whispered. I did, because the cadence of her whisper had changed. It had put on the careful shoes of a person approaching a wild animal. The sound we'd heard earlier, the slow draw, the exhale measured against a skinny chest, returned. My lamp's flame leaned away from me as if something larger had claimed the space where my breath wanted to live. "We mark," I said, "and we go." We marked. We reversed. The floor rose a finger. No drama. No roar. Just a polite adjustment, like a hostess moving a chair a little closer to the table. The rope hummed back to Mahmoud with our progress. I felt the vibrations of his patience, the way a father's hand on a swing keeps time with a child's risk. We reached the second corner. The chalk arrow had narrowed to something that looked pinched between 2 pages. The seam above my head sighed, the old wood noise in a place that has never known a tree. Out, Mahmoud tugged twice. We moved. And then the passage asked. That's the only way to say it. The stone around us made a small, soft sound that lived between air and throat, like a person clearing it. Hear that? Clara breathed. I hear the bill, I said, because terror is easier to carry when you make it into a joke your body can hold. At the mouth, the air returned to the loose kindness of a room that doesn't care if you live. We stepped into it, the way a drowning man steps onto a shore. Enough, Mahmoud said. But he didn't mean it. He set his jaw the way a man sets it when he's about to say the opposite. The film, Clara said, touching the tin against her chest. It's not just fear. You can see the lean. You can see the chalk deform. You can't film a thing that thinks, Mahmoud said softly. We rested. We drank a measure of water we hadn't earned. My hand shook when I tried to write down a number. I pressed harder, as if lead could anchor me. Outside, the sun committed to its downward promise. Inside, our lamps made their own small mornings and evenings every time the flame chose to stand or bow. One more, I said finally. We go one more length. We lay a fixed line all the way to the 4th corner. We measure. We come back. Mahmoud held my gaze for the exact length of time it takes to decide if someone you care about is brave or foolish. One more, he said, but we go with less breath. How do you do that? Clara asked, smiling despite herself. Breathe less. You don't talk, he said. He touched my shoulder. Save it for when you have to lie to something that isn't a person. We went again. Corner 1, chalk, arrow, 2 degrees. Corner 2, seam warm, breath shallow, lamp obedient. Corner 3. The coin taste grew stronger. My tongue wanted to spit and I made it behave, because spitting in front of a thing that might be alive felt like an insult I didn't want to owe. Between 3 and 4, the floor began to lift before my knees reached it. I shifted weight to my elbows and felt the stone negotiate with me. It didn't want my bones. It wanted my space. It wanted the shape of me. Arrow, I whispered. The chalk line went on thin and trembled, as if it were the one afraid. Back, Clara mouthed. She didn't waste the breath it would take to say the word aloud. The rope snagged. Not hard, not a trap. A question. The kind of snag that tests whether you will be the person who tugs or the person who reverses. No pull, I breathed, and I felt rather than saw Clara nod. We slid backward a hand, then another, and the snag held, a polite insistence that we solve its riddle. I inched my lamp toward the rope and saw it. The floor block had lifted just enough to pinch the hemp. When we had passed minutes ago, the gap had not been there. It had learned. I swallowed the word in the panic that wanted to go with it. On 3, I whispered. I lift, you slide, I lower, we pass it back. We did. The rope freed itself with a little silk sound that made gratitude bloom in my chest. We moved. The ceiling dropped a whisper, the floor rose a whisper, and the passage whispered louder. The soft code of friction moving slowly over surface. At the mouth, I turned. Because people like me always turn to look at the thing that almost killed them. The passage looked the same. The difference lived entirely in us. We now knew its tempo. Mahmoud sealed the seam with the block we'd disturbed, as best he could, and then he did something that made my mouth go dry. He marked the stone with a chisel stroke, a simple dash at the edge of the joint, and whispered a word in Arabic I did not know. What was that? Clara asked. A hello, he said, and a please. We left the pyramid just as the plateau remembered the color violet. The inspector was gone. The guards waved without caring. We walked like people who were practicing being ordinary again. A boy tried to sell us a postcard with a camel on it, and I bought it as if the transaction could buy me back into a world where stone is just stone. In the room we'd rented, the three of us sat with our backs against 3 different walls, as if we'd rehearsed covering the corners. Clara cleaned the Bolex like a mother cleans a child who has been somewhere dangerous. Mahmoud recoiled the rope so it would forgive us. I stared at my notebook until the numbers swam into shapes. "What are we proving?" Clara asked finally, very quietly. "That we were there," I said. "That it breathes," Mahmoud said. "That we can leave," I added, and the 3 sentences made a chord that didn't resolve. We slept like soldiers, boots near, lamps closer, the kind of sleep that isn't a vote of confidence in tomorrow, merely alone. I dreamt I had turned sideways and found out there wasn't a sideways. The walls of my chest and the walls of the world learned each other's boundaries and chose the same size. We went back at first light, because morning makes fools. Morning says new day, new rules. Morning lies in ways the night is too tired to bother with. The block at the seam bore Mahmoud's chisel dash. The mark had thinned. You cannot say that about a gouge in stone and remain the same person. "It pressed," Clara said. She put her finger near the mark without touching it, the way a devout person hovers near relics. "It remembers," Mahmoud said. We opened the seam again. It sighed more softly this time. The air beyond was cooler than the corridor, as if the passage had spent the night practicing stillness and had done well. We tied in. We slid. Corner 1, corner 2, corner 3. The rope sang back to Mahmoud with our weight, and my lamp's flame bowed and stood, the way a man at prayer can become his kneeling. Between 3 and 4, Clara stopped, and I knew we were in trouble because she did not stop gently. She froze, the kind of halt you only use when a thing is too close to explain to yourself. "What?" I mouthed. She tilted the Bolex so the lamp's light could slide past us, along the wall. The smooth face to our left, the one polished to a handful of beautiful, indifferent glints, wore a film of dust the way a body wears sweat. In the dust, the narrowest trails had appeared, not lines, not letters, shines, places where dust had not been allowed to settle because something had touched there first. Finger width, palm length, spaced like breaths. "They're not ours," Clara mouthed. She didn't raise the camera. She didn't dare give the moment the certainty of film. The floor rose the width of a coin. The ceiling dropped the width of a thought. My chest found out how to be less. "Back," I said, with as much calm as the word could wear. We reversed. The rope snagged again. Mahmoud's 3rd rule had been made for this moment. I could feel the knot in my back, like a friend with his hand on my collar. "No pull," I whispered. We shifted hips, elbows, brought the rope around a small tooth of stone. Free. Then my lamp went dim. Not out, not starved of oil, drained, as if the space around us had decided to drink. Clara's lamp followed, a polite bow from bright to not bright, and then the particular meanness of light that shows you only the distance your fear can reach. "It's drinking," Clara said aloud, unable to keep the science out of the terror. "It's drinking the light." The floor rose another whisper. The ceiling came to meet it. My shoulders told the truth, my mouth refused to form. We were being measured. The passage had learned our width, our softness, the little give in ribs and the little stubborn in bone. It was closing, slowly, so that the instruments of our panic would last long enough for it to study them. I pulled the rope twice. Out. Mahmoud answered with the strain of a man hauling a friend through a letter slot. The hemp bit my waist. The passage obliged our retreat the way a predator steps back to let you think you might win. We passed the chalked corner, the arrow now a thread. We reached the second bend, where the seam sighed again with the fondness of a grandmother who knows you will always come back. We came out like a birth in reverse, messy with dust, loud with lungs that had been forced to behave for too long. Mahmoud's face made a shape I had never seen on it, a relief so complete it looked like grief. "No more," he said. He was not asking us. He was speaking to something that listened. I should have agreed. I should have said yes, and meant it. But the part of me that believes you can pin a myth to a board, label, measure, prove, spoke. 3 more feet, I said, hating myself even as I said it. We anchor in the main corridor. We run a line to the 4th corner and leave it. If it moves by morning, we'll know how much and how fast. Mahmoud stared at me with the eyes of a man who's choosing between friendship and the version of love that pulls you out by your hair. "You want to feed it a rope," he said. "I want to feed us a fact," I said. Clara caught my sleeve. Her fingers were proof against genius. "We'll do it," she said, looking at Mahmoud. "Because if we don't, he'll come back alone, and I would rather die than let him come back alone." "That is a stupid vow," Mahmoud said, "but I have made stupider." He set the pulley. He retied the knots so the rope around me made sense to him, not to me. He kissed his thumb and pressed it to the chisel dash in the seam. "One more," he told the pyramid. "Then we leave you in peace." We went in again. This time we did not measure. We did not narrate. We moved like thieves in a room with a sleeping thing. At the 3rd corner, we taped the line to the smooth wall with a strip of wax cloth. At the 4th, we hitched a small bronze ring into a hairline crack and fed the rope through. When we reversed, the rope stayed, a vein we'd sewn into the passage, tied to the beating outside world. The floor rose. The ceiling lowered. The rope thrummed with the joy a line has when it has a purpose. At the mouth I turned. Last time, I promised myself last time. And the passage gave me something I had not expected. It stopped. Just a fraction. The floor eased down the width of a thumbnail. The ceiling lifted. The same. It had learned mercy, or the shape of our lies. We sealed it. We marked the time. We left. Outside, the sky was the color of the inside of a stone, blue drained into something bruised. We walked back to the room, lacking the dignity to call what we did walking. We were carrying an absence, the part of us the passage had asked for and not yet taken. Clara set the film to dry its breath. Mahmoud set the rope so it would tell us the truth tomorrow. I set my head against the cool plaster and told myself, one more dawn, one more look, one more number, and then we go home. I meant it. I swear I meant it. I woke before the sun remembered the plateau. The room smelled like dust, oil, and the ghost of yesterday's fear. Mahmoud was already awake, sitting with his boots on and his hands around a mug of tea that had decided to be cold. Clara had the Bolex in her lap as if a camera could be a saint. "Now," Mahmoud said simply. We didn't talk on the walk. There's a hush to morning that feels like a truce, and none of us wanted to be the first to break it. The guards waved us through with the small salute men give to people who insist on being themselves. The inspector wasn't there. Bureaucracy sleeps when stone does not. At the mouth of the passage we found our rope exactly where we had left it, running from the main corridor into the seam, tied smart as a promise. I put my hand on it and felt nothing. No pull, no slack, no song. Either it didn't move, Clara said, or it learned how not to brag. Mahmoud touched the chisel dash. It had thinned again. Not much. Enough to make a certain kind of man give up the habit of certainty. We opened the seam. It sighed, a louder, lower tone than yesterday, as if something inside had changed key. The air beyond was cooler again. The dust, there is always dust, hung in the cone of our lamps like hesitation. We slid in. The first corner greeted us with our own chalk, as though it had practiced being itself all night. The second gave us the warm seam and the coin taste. The third gave us a truth. The rope we had taped to the wall was now taut. The tape strained, the waxcloth peeled in an ugly curl. It moved, Clara whispered, and the whisper put on awe like a veil. How much? I said. Enough to count, Mahmoud answered. He placed his fingers against the chalk marks we'd scratched along the rope at handspan intervals. 1, 2, 3. 5 hands breadth, inward. Not gravitational, I said. Not settling. It's deliberate. Deliberate, but not cruel, Mahmoud said. If it wanted us, it would have learned faster. We reached the 4th corner. The rope there had bitten into the bronze ring. The ring had bitten into the crack. The crack had widened the width of a fingernail, the kind of gift that looks like kindness until you realize the finger it fits might be yours. I leaned and looked and wished I hadn't. Something beyond the corner moved. Not stone, not shadow, pressure. The optical illusion air makes when it decides to be a body. It pulsed, not like a heartbeat, like a person, breathing, lying on their side and counting to 4 because somebody told them it helps. Back, I said, my voice a little too polite to be useful. Wait, Clara said, and I hate that I loved her for saying it. She raised the Bolex, wound the spring, and spoke in the soft, firm voice she uses when she gives the universe notice that it is being recorded. Frame, 4th corner, rope tensioned, crack widened, rolling. The passage exhaled. You could hear it. Not wind, not a sigh over a bottle, a low, wet, intimate sound that made my throat close in sympathy. My lamp's flame leaned toward my chest as if the air between stone and me had been drained. My body did the math faster than my mind. Less air where I wanted air. More air where I wasn't. A chest that had to be smaller to keep the numbers honest. Ribs that chose a new size. Back, Mahmoud said. No room for argument. He pulled the rope twice. Out. We reversed. The floor lifted a whisper. We slid. The ceiling lowered a whisper. We slid. Clara's elbow caught on the smooth wall. Not a snag. Just a moment of friction, and the passage used the courtesy to study her shape. I saw it. I will never forget it. The space around her seemed to attempt the outline of a woman, not in stone, but in pressure. The way your breath fogs glass into the shape of your face. Do not stop, Mahmoud said, the calm of his voice a miracle I will never be equal to. Back, now. We moved with the submission of people who have remembered that their bodies are not negotiations. They are facts. The rope sang. The chalk arrows grew thin. We reached the 2nd corner, and the seam sighed in a tone I can only call pleased. We exited. The rope lay between the seam and the corridor, like a tongue we'd asked a mouth to keep out. Mahmoud sealed the block with a shove that made his shoulders groan. He set the chisel against the dash and did not strike. We are done, he told the stone in Arabic. We are grateful. We are done. Are we? Clara asked. Because courage asks questions it doesn't need answered. We are, he said. We stood in the main corridor with the rope in our hands like a lifeline that had finished its work. The pyramid around us remembered how to be architecture again. The air forgave us for needing it. That should have been the end. It is not. As we were gathering our small selves, the rope in my hand gave a tiny pull. Not hard, not urgent. The kind of tug a child gives when it wants to know if your hand is truly there. Mahmoud felt it too. He closed his hand. The rope tugged again. A syllable, not a word. No, he said to the stone. He said it like a father. No more. The rope pulled. Just once, strong, then released. It wasn't trying to take us. It was calling. It took me the length of 3 breaths to understand what had happened. The bronze ring at the 4th corner, wedged in the hairline crack, the crack widening, the ring drawn a finger deeper, the rope pulled in by the same slow patience that had studied our ribs. The pyramid had learned a toy. It will swallow the line by noon, I said, and I hated the relief in my voice, the part of me that wanted the decision made by the world so I didn't have to make it. We can leave it. We can go. Mahmoud shook his head, not to disagree, but to loosen something sorrow had tightened. "We do not leave a line in a throat," he said. "We take it back." "No," I said. "We seal it and we go. That's the only smart." Clara looked from me to him, from fear to a different fear, and then she made the choice a person makes when she cannot admit which of the two men she trusts more. "We'll be fast," she said to me and to him. "We'll be careful." We opened the seam one last time. It sighed with the weight of a favor that knows it is a favor. Mahmoud tied the rope around his waist, not mine. He put the ring of the pulley against the block in the corridor and handed the tail to me. "If I tug twice, you pull," he said. "If I do not tug, you pull." "Do not be clever," I said, "because love makes cowards of the honest." He smiled, a small, tired thing. "I am not clever," he said. "I am old." He slid inside. Clara slid after him, unspooling just enough slack to keep the line honest. I kept my lamp at the mouth and watched the line describe the world Mahmoud could not. It went in, and then jerked. Once, twice. I pulled. The pulley sang like a thing that knows its task. The rope came, inch by inch, and then snagged the way patience snags. Polite, insistent, making you want to be the tugger, not the solver. "Reverse," I whispered into a world that didn't care. The line eased, then came again. A foot, two. And then the sound I had not been brave enough to fear arrived. The low, wet draw of something not wind taking air, where a man wants to keep it. "Now," Mahmoud said from the white of the passage, voice thin, voice dear. "Now." We pulled. "Now." Clara backed out like a swimmer, elbows, knees, the dance of it practiced yesterday. Mahmoud did not come. The rope moved, but the knot around him described the shape of a man who had been asked to be smaller than he could be. The floor lifted the width of a coin. The ceiling lowered the width of an argument. The rope came, and then did not. "Cut," Clara said, the word obscene and holy at once. "No," I said, "because cutting is a promise you cannot keep." Again. We pulled, and the pulley screamed, and something in my back sang harmonies I will never be proud of. The rope stuttered through the ring. The line burned my palms through the leather. The seam exhaled with joy, or hunger, or both. Then, all at once, the rope came, a spill of slack, a flood of line like a body exhaling after the doctor says, "Breathe." Mahmoud landed in the corridor shoulder first, then hip, then laugh, a little bark, surprised and alive. The knot around his waist had bitten his skin purple. The dust on him described claws it didn't own. He was laughing because he had won a thing that had not wanted him to win. He was laughing because his chest still had room for laughter. We sealed the seam. We pushed the block home. We set the chisel against the dash and struck. Once, twice, not to hurt the stone, not to mark victory, to give ourselves a sound that belonged to us. Outside, the sun had the decency to be ordinary. The plateau was a place where you could buy water and lie to yourself about why your hands shook. We stood with our backs to a wall and counted breaths the way a monk counts prayers. In, 4, hold, 2, out, 6, again. "What did it want?" Clara asked finally. Mahmoud looked at the pyramid, and for the first time in the days I had known him, smiled like a man who forgives a thing that doesn't deserve it. "To study," he said. "To keep, to learn the size of us." "And what did we learn?" I asked, because I needed a sentence to hang this on, or I would hang it on my lungs and they would give out. "That we are bigger than we think," Clara said, a hand over her own ribs, "and smaller than we need to be." We left Giza that afternoon, not because we had proved anything, but because the part of us that wanted to survive had finally outvoted the part of us that wanted to know. In the train, Clara slept with the Bolex like a child. Mahmoud watched the desert pass the way a man watches a story he chose not to be in anymore. I stared at the window until it reflected me back as a stranger. At home, when people asked, we said what all honest liars say, that the pyramid is well made, that its passages keep secrets in the language of stone, That you can learn those secrets if you are patient and your rope holds, and if you understand that every measurement has a price. Sometimes when the room is very quiet and the radiator breathes like a low animal, I feel the air thin, not in my lungs but around them, as if the world were deciding whether to choose my shape. I count my breaths. I say the rules like a prayer, and I remember the sentence that saved us, the only one we could say to a thing that moved as slowly as judgment. No more. And when the white of winter fog presses at the window and my name seems to come from a place that doesn't have a mouth, I answer the old stone with the only mercy I learned in its throat. Not yet.